I tell you, he's right with the program already. Anyway, this is quite an incredible story. Some parents are now teaching sign language to hearing babies before they can even speak. We're going to find out why, because I'm joined by Dr. Joseph Garcia, the founder of Sign to Me, and Paula Fisher, who is, what would you call yourself, a practitioner or a
teacher, educator.
Yeah, and she's brought her twins with her. That is Taylor, and that is Colton, the enthusiastic clapper.
That's a good job, buddy.
Does that mean anything in particular, Doc?
Yes.
Well, it means
just like
yay, yay, yay. So this was not, you were already well practiced and well schooled in American Sign Language before you decided to develop this idea with kiddos?
Yes, I used to be a sign language interpreter, and I taught ASL for quite a few years.
Right. You can't keep your hands still, can you?
Well,
you're doing it all the time anyway.
well, sometimes not.
Yeah. So what was it that made you think that an infant could benefit from this?
Well, I was raised around the deaf community throughout my life, so I saw...
Why is that?
Well, I went to a parochial school when I was very young, and we had... they didn't have special education back in those days, so if you wanted, if you had a special needs child, you would have to go to a parochial school or private school to get education. So we had blind children, deaf children, and mentally retarded children in our mainstream. We didn't use the word mainstream back in those days, but they were in our classroom.
What are you talking about, the ARC?
Well, this goes back into the early 50s,
yes.
so it's a ways back ago. But so we saw deaf children using sign, and I saw a very young child who was a sibling of a deaf child who had very strong command of English, but also sign fluently, and they could sit in the back of the classroom and talk to each other quietly when the teacher wasn't looking, but no one else could in the class. So, because they were using signs, of course. And so...
the ultimate subversion.
Yeah, right, creating a monster.
Yeah.
So, I always wondered, how could he ever learn to speak if his whole family was deaf and signing all the time?
Yes.
But of course, the whole world is hearing, and the whole world has, is speaking all the time. So anyway, it always intrigued me that someone without speech in their family would be able to learn to talk.
Yes.
And throughout the years, I realized that with the whole world speaking and hearing, and just small groups of people in the deaf families signing, there's a lot of exposure for sound and speech.
Right. So when you went to medical school, was that the field that you wanted to pursue?
Well, actually, I became an EMT, a paramedic at first, and then I went into education. My doctorate is in education.
Right, so you're not an MD?
No.
I see, okay. I wasn't quite
PhD
sure.
versus...
PhD, yes. Now, how did you get involved in this? Your children are both hearing.
Yes, they are. I got involved actually from a girlfriend that was signing with her baby, and it was before I had kids, and I was amazed at the same thing, how early on that they were able to communicate without using any words. And so I decided then, my husband, that it was definitely something we wanted to do when we had kids. When we had our twins, Colton and Taylor, we started signing with them. And I think it's something that's just really getting momentum. You know, there's a lot of parents are starting to hear about it, and a lot of parents using the program, Joseph's program of Sign with Your Baby. And I think that
Is it the only program for babies?
Well, there's one other program called Baby Signs, but they suggest using made-up signs, and there's no consistency from child care to family to family.
See, Mommy.
So.
You saw her on the TV. Taylor already signed to me something, and
Yes,
I wouldn't
she
have
did.
known what it meant, other than I thought she was
What did
saying
you
goodbye to me in Italian.
What were you signing?
But
Sure, we
Was
have
that
to
be
sign
quiet?
to Baby Avery. What are you signing?
what does that mean?
Bird. What about
Too
here?
many.
What is that one? What's that on the table?
Right, and you
Flower.
both know that. And at what age would they have learned that?
Well, they started signing at 8 months. Colton was pretty much 8 months on the nose. He signed for milk, and Taylor was probably a couple days later. And really, I think 8 months to 12 months, it was a lot of basic signing, you know, prompting, that kind of thing. And then around 12, 13 months, they really started to develop the vocabulary. They kind of went through really a signing explosion. They got it, and by, well, 14 months, they were doing about 25 signs each.
Learning faster than you did?
Well, I kept up pretty good.
I mean, you'd have to. You have to be one step ahead, don't you?
Yeah, well, you do. You need to be able to be offering them the signs too. But they get to a point where they look at things and point, and then they're looking at you like, "Come on, what's that?" You're like, "Okay."
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's like learning a second language, is really what it is.
Well, actually, you're learning your reference point. So there's not really a second language, because for a young child, it's what they're doing is they're seeing the patterns of life. They notice the different similarities and the regularity to certain patterns, and they hear the sounds that you speak as well as the motions that you make. So if you just augment your normal communication, when you get to nurse, for example, you say you want some milk, and you sign the sign for milk, eventually they say, hey, Mom always does this when I get nursed. Maybe if I do this, I can get nursed when I'm hungry. They reach their little hand up and do it. Pretty soon they get nursed and say, hey, this is great.
So I'll be doing this to, you know, and at 3 she does this.
Oh, they still sign a lot.
Yes.
And it's because, I guess because I sign still with them a lot too, but there's so many times that it's still handy, you know, when we're out and if I need to ask them from across the room if they have to go to the bathroom. And, you know, they can be...
What is that sign?
That's toilet.
This is, do it again?
The,
With the thumb up
Yeah.
here like that?
like this.
Like this? You know what
Yeah.
that means? It's like, what is she doing that for? No, not me. It's
So,
okay.
yeah. So I
Not
use
this-
it for
I'm
that.
all right at the moment. Okay, I'll
She's
just
like,
take a little
"You
break and be right back. She's shy, a little bit shy. Okay, we're talking about the latest parenting technique of teaching your hearing child how to sign American Sign Language, Dr. Joseph Garcia and Paula Fisher. And she is here with her twins, Colton and Taylor. Taylor is the one with the pink bits in her hair. So these children have learned since 8 months old. Is that a pretty good time to start?
Yeah, usually you start signing and modeling the signs. You never really teach signs, you just model the signs because you want the child to discover the signs on their own. But you just start modeling them around 4 to 5 months old, 6 months old, anywhere in that range. And
Right.
let them just watch because they have to take some time to process. You know, they
Yes.
watch, observe, discover the signs, and then take a chance on trying to make the signs eventually. Around 8 to 10 months, generally speaking.
And you think the great advantage of this is being able to communicate with somebody that cannot talk. That is the ticket?
Well, from which perspective? From the parent's perspective, sure. But from a child's perspective, it opens their whole world up. They can navigate through life rather than riding the roller coaster of life. And that's a big difference between an attitude and a child.
But these guys, they at this age now can say, my ear hurts.
Oh, they're talking fluently now,
Yeah.
yes. It's just there's a window of opportunity between about 8, 9 months and 18 to 20 months whenever speech starts becoming really clearly pronounced. And that's a long... One day is long if you can't communicate with your child.
Well, that is true, and we spend maybe even 2 years most of the time with children that communicate by either yelling or crying,
Sure,
or and that is the only means of communication, really. It's amazing that we didn't know about this before, that there was a possibility of this.
Yeah.
To think that a 6-month-old, 7-month-old can tell you something without you having to go, oh, is it this, is it
Oh,
that,
yeah.
is it this? You know, it's pretty incredible.
It is. It is. I think that by the time these guys have kids, by the time my kids are having kids, I do think that it's going to be common practice out there that parents are going to be using sign language to communicate with their pre-verbal babies, and it's something that is gaining momentum. A lot of parents are doing it, and it's kind of like one of those things when you look back. You know, you look outside now, and you can't find a kid out there that doesn't wear a bicycle helmet. You know, and 30 years ago when I was riding my bike, I didn't have a bicycle helmet, and it's sort of the same thing. You know, it's basically, we all know now the benefits of using a bicycle helmet. It's a no-brainer, and I think that using sign language with your baby is a no-brainer.
Well, you know, if you're going to learn how to do this, if you're going to train yourself to teach your kid this, you can get the book, which is here, and we've shown it a lot.
Yeah, it's a 3-dimensional language, so motion's important, and that's why we do have a video and a DVD that goes along with it you can watch and learn from pretty quickly, actually.
Right. So how many kids do you think that you have, I don't know what I'm supposed to say, parents or kids, I don't know who's learning what, but people with children.
Oh my gosh, well, I think they've sold over 500,000 learning kits, but I've personally dealt with more than 5,000 parents, families at various hospitals in the Northwest for the last 15 years or so.
Right. I think that your little package of testimonies that you sent, where the child who kept signing that her ear hurt, this is a little tiny baby, like a year old or something, sitting in her high chair and saying, owie, owie, owie. And
pain sign, yeah.
Yeah, what's that? Pain?
This is
Pain.
You can take a headache, sore throat, tummy ache, anywhere.
And they can learn that at 8 months.
Oh, yes. You'd be surprised at what comes out of these little minds. There was a little child who saw a bird at a feeder, and they would always sign bird. One day a squirrel came and chased all the birds away, but the child didn't know the sign for squirrel, so she looked at it, said, "Rrrr." And so the way the mind can create things, children are so creative and so resourceful to use their resources that they have.
And what a tremendous waste from the time that they are sort of compass at, let's say, 6 months, like really there, you know, like have an ability to make a motor a movement to tell you, not saying that they're a vacuum before, but, you know, you have to have some sort of motor skill to be able to do this, wouldn't you?
Well, to squeeze your hand together for milk, more. Most of the signs are pretty iconic and very easy to make. They're very simple signs.
But if you think that if that 18 months between that age and 2, when we normally think somebody, they're going to tell you something, what a tremendous waste of 18 months if you haven't been able to communicate then. I think that's
You
such
can't imagine the battles I've fought over the last 15 years trying to convince people that a child won't grow a third eye or not be able to stand up or walk again or
because
something.
you're going to teach them. Well, they used to say that when you were teaching a child another language anyway.
Well, they say, will my baby learn to talk if I sign? So I just answer them, well, you're teaching language to your child. The modality or the type of language is secondary to the concept that they're processing language in their minds. And that's the most important thing.
And look at these two. They're just on fire.
Oh, yeah.
I can't thank you both enough for coming. It was really great to find out about this.